Not slowly, not with warning. It came down the way mountains fall in earthquakes, without negotiation, without the courtesy of a moment to prepare. 1 second it stood. The next it was powder and smoke rolling across the ground like a living thing, like something that had been waiting inside the stone all along and had finally been given permission to escape. Khalifa pressed his back against the broken foundation of what used to be the garrison command post and listened to the sound of his people dying 30 meters away. He had stopped counting the dead. There was a point, he thought it was around day 7, when counting became something his mind simply refused to continue doing, not from weakness, from a different kind of strength, the strength that decides what it can afford to carry and what it has to set down in order to keep moving. The Dran had been shelling the colony of Vareth. 6 for 11 days. 11 days of the sky turning orange with plasma bursts. 11 days of the ground vibrating so constantly that Kale had stopped noticing it, until it stopped for 30 seconds once, during a targeting recalibration he hadn't known about, and the silence had felt like a wound, like something had been removed from him that he hadn't known he needed until it was gone. His unit had started with 42 soldiers. He could count the ones still breathing without using all his fingers. The colony had been a functioning settlement 6 months ago. 12,000 civilians, a working agri-processing hub, the kind of place that appeared on maps as a small circle with a designation number and meant nothing to anyone who hadn't lived there. It had schools. It had a market district that Kale had walked through exactly once on his first rotation in, buying something warm to drink from a vendor who'd argued with him cheerfully about the local harvest season. He thought about that vendor sometimes, during the shelling, during the silences. He didn't know if she was in the shelters or if she was somewhere under the rubble that used to be the market district. He had decided not to find out until there was something he could do about it. Sub-Commander Yiz crawled to his side through the rubble. She moved the way she always moved, efficiently, without waste, without the small hesitations that fear introduced into a soldier's motion. Her left arm was in a field wrap that had gone brown with dried fluid sometime in the past 2 days. She held a communicator in her good hand. Her eyes, all 4 of them, arranged in the slightly asymmetric pattern that was characteristic of Vareth natives from the eastern settlements, were flat and still in the way. Vareth eyes went when a soldier had moved past fear into something colder, something that had burned through fear like fuel and come out the other side, running on a different kind of energy entirely. Fleet confirmation, she said. Her voice did not shake. She had been a soldier for 30 years, and she would not let her voice shake now. There were things you gave up to the enemy and things you kept, and the steadiness of your voice in front of your surviving soldiers was something you kept. Our 2nd Fleet group has been destroyed in orbit, she continued. The 3rd is not responding. Kale looked at the communicator. The screen showed a star map of the Vareth 6 system. The icons representing friendly ships had gone dark one by one over the past 6 hours until the display looked like a funeral, the kind where you kept expecting more people to arrive and slowly understood that everyone who was coming was already there, and that the absence of the others was now permanent. A handful of red markers moved through the system, Dran Fleet signatures. They moved with the slow, patient confidence of things that had already won, things that understood the outcome, and were simply completing the administrative work of confirming it. The civilian shelters? He asked, still sealed. 7,000 inside. She paused, and the pause carried more weight than the words that followed. The deepest ones are reinforced well enough to survive bombardment. He waited. They will not survive what comes after the bombardment. Kale understood what she meant. He had understood it since day 4, when it became clear that relief was not arriving on the schedule command had promised, and that the math of their situation did not care about promises. When the Dran stopped shelling, they would send ground troops into the rubble to finish the work. The Dran did not leave survivors as a policy, not on colony worlds, not when the colony had resisted. Vareth 6 had resisted. Every soldier still breathing in these ruins had made that choice, with full knowledge of what it cost. That was what it meant to be a garrison soldier on a contested colony world. You knew the math before you signed. You accepted it. He thought about the 7,000 civilians below the ground. He thought about the children among them. He thought about how they would hear the shelling stop and think it meant safety. He thought about what they would find when they opened the shelter doors. He stopped thinking about it. How long until they move ground units in? He asked. An hour, maybe less. Their forward units are already at the perimeter. Cale pulled himself up enough to look over the broken wall. The forward edge of the Dran advance was visible at the far end of what had been the colony's main road, a wide boulevard that had once been lined with structures that were now rubble and memory. The Dran formation stretched across it in a wide front, armored units moving with steady mechanical patience. They had numbers. They had armor. They had complete orbital control. They were not in a hurry because they did not need to be. There was a particular kind of contempt in unhurried movement, and Cale had been watching it for 11 days. He slid back down. YIS was watching him. We hold the civilian shelters as long as we can, he said. It was not a plan. It was a statement of intent, which was the only thing left when plans ran out, when the tactical options had been exhausted and the resources were gone. And what remained was simply the choice of how to face what was coming. She nodded. She had expected nothing less and nothing more. They had known each other for 8 years across 3 postings, and there was a kind of communication available to people who had known each other that long, that required no words and wasted none. He checked his energy cells. 1 full cell, 1 at 30%. He set the partial cell aside and loaded the full one. Around him, the survivors of his unit were doing the same quiet arithmetic, counting what they had, measuring it against what was coming, making the numbers work in their heads because making the numbers work was the only control. They had left. Then Ren grabbed his arm. Ren was the youngest soldier in the unit, a boy barely past his first service year who still flinched at loud sounds when he thought no one was watching. Cale had noticed that about him in the first week and had said nothing. Because a soldier who flinches and stays is worth more than a soldier who doesn't flinch and runs. And Ren had stayed through 11 days of things that would have justified running. He grabbed Cale's arm with both hands, and his grip was tight with something that wasn't fear. Commander, he said. The sky. Cale looked up. The cloud cover over Vareth 6 was thick and gray, and had been for days, lit from below by the orange glow of burning structures. A sky that had stopped being a sky and had become a ceiling, pressing down. But through a break in the clouds to the north, something was moving, not Dran ships. He knew those silhouettes by now, knew them the way you came to know the shape of a thing that had been trying to kill you. For 11 days, these were different, longer. The whole configuration was wrong for anything in the Dran fleet, wrong for anything he recognized. 3 vessels, large, moving in a hard and fast descent arc that did not match any standard orbital approach pattern he had ever seen or trained against. Yiz had her optics up. She said nothing for several seconds. Alliance transponder codes, she said finally. But the ships are not ours. What are they? She lowered the optics. Her 4 eyes met his, and he saw on them an expression he had no name for because he had never seen it on her face before. Not in 8 years. Not in 3 postings, not in combat and loss and the accumulated weight of a military career. Human, she said. Cale had heard of humans. Most of the Vareth Alliance had heard of humans by then. The way you hear about a distant storm as a thing that exists, that has a reputation, that you hope stays far away from you not because you fear it, but because storms, even useful ones, are disruptive and complicated. The Alliance had accepted their application for membership 2 years ago. After extensive deliberation, there had been diplomatic meetings and trade agreements and formal ceremonies, with lengthy speeches that Cale had paid no attention to because none of it had seemed relevant to a garrison soldier on a colony world at the edge of the system. His job was to keep this particular piece of ground safe. Interspecies diplomacy was someone else's problem. He had never seen a human ship. He watched the 3 vessels punch through the cloud, layer at an angle that made his chest tighten. Instinctively, the animal, part of his brain registering the speed as wrong, too fast for a controlled landing, too steep for any sane descent profile, the kind of angle that his flight training, years ago, and never seriously applied. categorized as structural failure in progress. Then the ships leveled. Barely, just enough. And then the ships opened, not the landing bays. The holes. Panels blew outward along the lower hulls, and from each vessel, in clusters, dozens of small objects fell. They trailed fire as they dropped,